Zara Thomas is not just an ordinary high school student. Even though she's only 16 years old, she's already very popular at Eastlake High School. Everyone knows her, not just because she's really smart and gets good grades, but also because she's a leader in many of the school's clubs. Her bright smile and quick thinking make her a favorite among her friends and even with teachers. They respect her because she works hard and always wants to learn more. One thing that makes Zara stand out is how proud she is of who she is. Zara loves her natural hair. Sometimes she wears it in a big, beautiful afro, and other times she braids it in creative styles. Her hair is special to her, and she feels that it shows who she is and where she comes from. But even though Zara loves her hair, some people at school don't always understand it. Sometimes teachers and school leaders, while acting polite, say things that hurt her feelings. They might say her hair looks unprofessional or suggest that it's not suitable for special events at school. These comments are quiet, but Zara knows what they mean. Even though people say things like this, Zara never changes who she is. She knows that her hair is a big part of her identity. It connects her to her culture and to her ancestors, and it shows her strength. But it's still hard for her to always have to explain or defend why her hair matters to her. One day, Zara stood in front of the bathroom mirror, getting ready for an important day. Today, she would be giving a big presentation in front of her classmates about climate change. As she carefully parted her thick, curly hair into sections, she began to twist each part into tight braids. Her fingers moved quickly, and soon her hair was done. She looked at herself in the mirror and smiled. She felt proud of how she looked. Her hair was like a crown, and it made her feel connected to her roots and her culture. No matter what anyone else thought, Zara knew her hair was beautiful. After she finished her hair, Zara put on her favorite hoop earrings and grabbed her backpack. When she came downstairs, her mom was waiting for her. "Looking good, baby," her mom said with a smile. "Are you ready for today?" Zara nodded, but inside she felt a little nervous. She wasn't worried about her presentation because she had practiced it many times. What bothered her was the way people would react to her hair. She knew that when she walked into school with her braids, some teachers and students would stare, and a few might say things like, "Wow, your hair is so big today." And then there was Principal Carter, the school principal. He always smiled, but his smile seemed forced, and sometimes Zara felt like he was watching her, like she didn't belong. Zara tried to forget about these thoughts. Today was about her presentation, not about what other people thought. When she arrived at school, the halls were busy, filled with students hurrying to class. Zara greeted her friends with her usual excitement. They laughed and chatted, and being with them made her feel better. She loved school most of the time. Being on the debate team and the student council gave her a sense of purpose, and her friends were always there to support her. But as she walked into class, she noticed a change. A few students looked at her braids and whispered to each other. She heard someone say, "Here we go again." Zara felt frustrated, but she reminded herself that she wasn't at school for their opinions. She had a job to do today, and that was giving her presentation. As the day went on, Zara focused on her classes. Finally, the bell rang for her last class, the one where she would give her presentation. She felt a mix of excitement and nerves as she walked to the front of the room. Her teacher smiled at her, and that gave her a little extra confidence. Zara took a deep breath and began her presentation. "Good afternoon, everyone," she started. "Today I'm going to talk about something very important, climate change." As she spoke, Zara felt her nervousness start to fade. She had practiced this presentation so many times, and now everything was flowing smoothly. Her voice was steady and clear as she explained how climate change is affecting the world. She showed her classmates slides with graphs and pictures, explaining how the Earth is getting warmer and how this is causing problems like melting ice caps and rising sea levels. She talked about how some places, like villages in Bangladesh, are being flooded because of climate change. These people are losing their homes and everything they have, even though they didn't cause the problem. Zara explained that many of the people hurt the most by climate change are from poor communities or belong to groups that don't have much power. These people contribute the least to climate change, but they are the ones who suffer the most. As Zara spoke, she noticed that her classmates were paying close attention. Usually, some students fidget or whisper during presentations, but today everyone was quiet and listening carefully. Zara could see that her words were having an effect. She wanted her classmates to understand how serious climate change is, and it seemed like they were beginning to see that. This isn't just about the environment, Zara said, pausing for a moment to let her words sink in. It's about people. Real people are losing their homes and their way of life because of climate change. She looked around the room and saw that her classmates were really thinking about what she had said. Some of them looked surprised or worried. Zara was glad that they were starting to understand the human side of the issue. We all have a responsibility to do something about this, Zara continued. It's not enough just to know about climate change. We have to take action, and that means all of us, governments, businesses, and even regular people like you and me. Zara clicked to the next slide, which showed a list of things that people could do to help fight climate change. She talked about simple actions like using less electricity, recycling, and supporting clean energy. She explained that even small actions could make a big difference if enough people do them. I know it can feel like we're too small to make a difference, Zara said, her voice softening. But every action counts, and when millions of people start making small changes, it can add up to something really big. She finished her presentation by reminding her classmates that they were the future. Their generation would inherit the planet, and it was up to them to protect it. As Zara finished, the room was quiet for a moment. Then her classmates began to clap, and her teacher smiled proudly at her. Zara felt a sense of accomplishment wash over her. She had done it. She had shared something important, and her classmates had listened. Later that day, as she walked through the halls, Zara felt proud, not just of her presentation, but of herself. Even though some people didn't always understand her or her hair, she knew who she was, and she knew she was making a difference. And that, she thought, was what really mattered. Zara was in front of her class, giving a presentation about young people around the world who were standing up for what they believed in. She talked about activists like Greta Thunberg, who inspired students to speak up and take action for the planet. She showed slides that talked about how important it was for people, especially young people, to make a change before it was too late. On the last slide, there was a big message that said, "The time to act is now." Zara paused, letting everyone in the room think about those words. She looked at her classmates' faces. Some of them looked amazed, while others seemed like they were thinking hard. It made her feel like they were really getting the point she was trying to make. Zara knew this presentation was important. It wasn't just about getting a good grade. It was about telling everyone that they could make a difference and help save the planet. Zara spoke with a strong and steady voice. We don't have time to wait. The choices we make today will decide the future of our world. We can make the earth better, but it starts with us. We need to care, act, and ask for more from our leaders. Climate change is a big problem, but it's also a big chance for us to do something great. Let's make sure we're on the right side of history. When she finished her speech, she turned off the projector and looked at the room. For a moment, it was quiet. Then her teacher started clapping, and soon the whole class joined in. The applause was much louder than she had expected, and it made her feel proud. Zara wasn't just proud of her speech. She was proud that she made people think about something important. She had started a conversation that could change the world. But just as she was feeling good about her presentation, something unexpected happened. A minute after she sat down, Principal Carter, another teacher, walked into the room. He looked right at her and said, "Miss Johnson, could I see you in my office?" Zara was surprised and a little nervous. Her classmates exchanged confused glances. She hadn't done anything wrong, so why was Principal Carter asking to see her? Zara followed Principal Carter to his office, feeling uneasy. When they got there, he sat down at his desk, looking serious. "Zara," he said, "I've received some complaints about your appearance today, specifically your hair." Zara felt her heart sink. Her hair? She didn't understand. "My hair?" she asked. "Yes," Principal Carter continued. "The school has rules, and your hair doesn't follow them. It's too distracting. It's not professional, and it doesn't fit the image we want to show here." Zara couldn't believe what she was hearing. She had spent a lot of time making sure her hair looked neat. It was styled in braids, something she loved. But now she was being told that her hair was a problem. "Principal Carter, my hair is part of who I am. It's not a distraction," she said, trying to stay calm. Principal Carter sighed like he had heard this before. "I understand, but we have rules. This isn't personal. It's about following the school's dress code." Zara felt frustrated. "So, what do you want me to do? Change my hair? I followed the dress code. My hair is neat and styled. How is that against the rules?" Principal Carter looked at her coldly. "I'm not asking, Zara. Either you fix it by tomorrow or you'll face the consequences." Zara couldn't believe this. She was being asked to change her hair, something that was part of her culture, something that made her who she was. "I'm not changing my hair," she said, her voice shaking with anger. "This is who I am." Principal Carter didn't like that answer. "Then you're suspended, effective immediately." The news of Zara's suspension spread quickly through the school. By the time she left Principal Carter's office, everyone was talking about it. Her phone buzzed constantly with texts from her friends. Some were supportive, telling her they were on her side. Others didn't seem to know what to think and wondered if she had really been suspended just because of her hair. When Zara got home, she told her parents what had happened. Her mom was furious. "They can't do this to you," she shouted. "They think they can treat us this way because we're black, but we're not going to let them get away with this." Zara's father, who was usually very calm, looked serious and upset. He sat down at the kitchen table and said, "This is wrong. We're going to fight this, Zara. You did nothing wrong." Zara listened to her parents talk about what they were going to do next. Her mom wanted to fight back right away. Her dad was already thinking about talking to a lawyer. But Zara felt sad and angry. She had worked so hard to be a good student, and now she was being punished just for being herself. As her parents kept talking, Zara looked at her reflection in the window. Her braids framed her face, and she thought about how much she loved them. They were part of her identity, part of her culture. "I'm not backing down," she whispered to herself. She knew she had to stay strong. The days after Zara's suspension were tough. She stayed at home while everyone else went to school. She felt isolated, like she was being singled out for something that wasn't even her fault. Her phone kept buzzing with messages. Some friends sent her kind words telling her to stay strong. But others weren't so sure and thought maybe she should have just followed the rules to avoid the trouble. Her best friend, Maya, sent her a text that said, "This is so unfair, Zara. You know we've got your back." Even with the support from her friends, Zara felt lonely. No matter how many nice messages she got, she couldn't forget how embarrassed she felt. She had been told that something about her, something that was part of her culture and identity, was wrong. At home, Zara's parents were working hard to fight the suspension. Her mom called different community groups to get support, and her dad spoke to a lawyer. They were determined to make sure the school knew they were wrong. "We're not letting this slide," her father said one evening. "This isn't just about your hair, Zara. This is about discrimination." Her mother nodded. "They want us to shrink. They want us to change who we are just to fit in. But we won't stay quiet. We're going to stand up and fight this." Zara was grateful for her parents' support, but she still felt upset. She just wanted to be a normal student again. But now, because of the suspension, everyone was talking about her. Some people were calling her a troublemaker. Others thought she was being rebellious. All she had ever wanted was to be herself, but now it felt like she was being punished for that. At school, things were buzzing. Students whispered about Zara in the hallways. Some thought the school was being unfair. Others thought she should have just followed the rules to avoid all the drama. But Zara knew deep down that this wasn't just about rules. This was about something bigger. She wasn't going to change who she was just to make other people feel comfortable. And now, with her parents ready to fight back, Zara knew that this was about more than just her hair. It was about standing up for what was right, not just for herself, but for everyone who had ever been told that they didn't belong just because they looked different. Zara knew the fight ahead wouldn't be easy, but she wasn't alone. She had her family, her friends, and her community behind her, and she was ready to stand tall, just like the young activists she had talked about in her presentation. She was ready to make a difference, not just for herself, but for others too. Zara sat quietly in a big office with a lawyer named Miss Jackson. Miss Jackson was very smart and serious. She looked right into Zara's eyes and began talking about something really important. Miss Jackson told Zara, "What happened to you was wrong. They said your hair was distracting and unprofessional, but your hair is part of who you are. It's part of your culture, and it's unfair that they treated you like that. The law is on your side, and we're going to fight back." Zara listened carefully. She knew something wasn't right when the school told her that her hair wasn't allowed, but now Miss Jackson was going to help her make things right. "We're going to complain to the school for treating you unfairly," Miss Jackson said. "But we need to make our case strong. Do you remember any other times when students like you with brown or black skin were treated unfairly because of the way they looked?" Zara thought for a moment. She remembered something that had happened a long time ago. When she was younger, in one of her grades, a boy named Caleb was sent home because his hair was too long. But Zara knew other kids with lighter skin had long hair too, and they weren't sent home. It didn't seem fair at all. She told Miss Jackson about Caleb, and Miss Jackson's face became even more serious. "Good," she said, writing notes quickly. "This is not just about you, Zara. There's a pattern here. That means there are other kids being treated unfairly too. We're going to show everyone what's happening." As time went on, Miss Jackson and her team worked hard to learn more about the principal, Principal Carter. Zara had always thought something wasn't quite right about him. He was always very polite, but sometimes he said things that made her feel like she didn't belong. One night, Zara was sitting in the living room when her mom came in holding a paper, looking really surprised. "Zara," her mom said, "you won't believe this." Zara's dad put down his newspaper, curious to know what was going on. Her mom handed the paper to her dad. "Miss Jackson found out something about Principal Carter's past," her mom said. Zara leaned in closer. "What did she find?" she asked. Her mom shook her head, still in shock. "He was part of a big problem at another school. They were punishing black students more than the others. And guess what? He even suggested banning black hairstyles like braids and afros. He said those hairstyles didn't fit with the school's rules." Zara felt a chill go down her spine. So this wasn't just about her hair. Principal Carter had been unfair to kids like her for a long time. "What happened to him?" Zara asked, her voice trembling a little. Her dad read the paper, his face getting more serious with each word. The school didn't let everyone know what was really going on. They made deals with the families quietly, and then Principal Carter moved here, to your school. Zara's mind was racing. She had thought this was just about her, but now she saw that Principal Carter had been treating kids unfairly for a long time. Her dad stood up and said, "This isn't just about your suspension. This man has a pattern of treating black students unfairly, and we're going to make sure everyone knows about it." Soon, Miss Jackson and her team filed a lawsuit against the school, which means they officially complained and asked for the court to help. The news spread quickly, and soon journalists were talking about it on TV and in the newspapers. Headlines appeared everywhere saying things like, "High school student suspended for natural hair," and "Principal's dark past revealed." Zara's phone wouldn't stop buzzing. People she didn't even know were sending her messages, some of them sharing their own stories. Other girls with natural hair reached out to Zara, thanking her for standing up for them. Her story became even bigger online, where people started using a hashtag, which is like a special phrase that connects messages together. They called it Stand with Zara. Thousands of people were using the hashtag to talk about how they had been treated unfairly because of their hair, too. Zara stared at her phone, feeling amazed at all the support. She had never imagined her situation would become so big, but now she knew her fight wasn't just for her. It was for everyone who had ever been told that their hair wasn't okay. At school, everyone was talking about it. Some teachers tried to stay quiet about it, while others supported Zara. Some even said that they agreed with Principal Carter and thought that certain hairstyles weren't professional. The students had their opinions too. Some kids started wearing their hair in braids, afros, and other natural styles to show they were on Zara's side. Others whispered behind her back, saying she was just trying to cause trouble or that she was making too big of a deal out of things. But when the news about Principal Carter's past became known, everything changed. People started to see that this wasn't just one small problem. This was part of something much bigger, something that had been going on for a long time. Soon, Zara's family's house was full of phone calls and emails. Activists, reporters, and supporters from all over the country wanted to talk to them. Zara's case was becoming a national story. One evening, while they were sitting together in the living room, the TV showed a news report about her case. There were pictures of Zara smiling with her braids, and then videos of people outside her school holding signs. Some signs said, "Our hair, our identity," and "End discrimination." Zara's mom looked at her with pride. "You've started something much bigger than we ever thought," she said. Zara nodded. It felt unbelievable. She had only been trying to fight for her right to wear her natural hair, but now her story had become part of a movement. She started getting messages from girls who had been sent home for wearing braids or afros, just like her. Zara realized her story was becoming their story too. She was fighting for all the girls who had ever been told their hair wasn't good enough. Miss Jackson warned Zara's family that the school would try to fight back. They would probably deny everything and try to make it seem like Zara was the one who was wrong. But Zara's family was ready. They had gathered statements from other students who had seen unfair things happen, both at Zara's school and at Principal Carter's old school. And they had something very important. Emails that showed the school board had tried to cover up what Principal Carter had done before. These emails made people even angrier. It was clear that some people in charge were trying to hide what was going on, but now everything was out in the open. The hashtag #StandWithZara kept growing online. People were sharing Zara's story and calling for schools to stop punishing kids for their natural hair. Videos and pictures of students proudly wearing their afros, braids, and locks were everywhere. Some famous people even joined the movement, talking about how unfair it was to tell kids how their hair should look. One day, Zara was scrolling through her phone when she saw a video of a young girl named Kiara. The girl looked about 12 years old and had a big, beautiful afro. She was walking confidently through her school, smiling as she held her head high. In the caption, Kiara wrote, "Thank you, Zara, for showing me that I can be proud of who I am." Zara felt tears in her eyes. Seeing Kiara and other girls like her made Zara realize just how important this fight was. It wasn't just about her anymore. It was about all the kids who had been made to feel bad about their natural hair. As the movement grew bigger and louder, the school started to panic. They put out a statement saying that Zara's suspension had nothing to do with her hair or race, and that it was just about breaking the dress code. They said it was all a misunderstanding and that they believed in diversity and inclusivity. But it was too late. No one believed them. More students started coming forward, sharing their own stories of discrimination at the school. Everyone could see that this was a bigger problem than just one suspension. Zara had started something much larger than she ever expected. She wasn't just fighting for herself. She was standing up for all the kids who had been told they didn't belong because of the way they looked. And she wasn't going to give up. There was a school where a teacher named Principal Carter was very strict. He didn't like it when students looked or acted different from what he thought was normal. Many of the students felt hurt by the way he treated them, but for a long time, they didn't say anything. They were scared no one would believe them, and they didn't want to get in more trouble. But when a girl named Zara shared her story about how badly Principal Carter treated her, everything changed. Zara's story made other students feel brave. They started telling their own stories about how Principal Carter had treated them unfairly. Soon, a lot of people were talking about it on the news, on social media, and even to lawyers. It was like a huge wave of stories all about the same person, Principal Carter. People couldn't believe how many students had been hurt by him. One of the first students to speak up was a woman named Sophia. She was 26 years old now, but she still remembered what happened when she was a teenager, just like it was yesterday. Sophia was a happy student who loved school. One day when she was 16, she got her hair braided in neat cornrows. She was excited to show her new hairstyle to her friends at school, but that excitement didn't last long. During math class, Principal Carter asked Sophia to come out of the classroom. She thought she was in trouble because of her grades or something she did wrong. But Principal Carter didn't talk about her schoolwork. Instead, he said her braids were a problem. He told her that her hairstyle was distracting other students and that she looked unprofessional. Sophia was so confused. She didn't know why her hair was a problem. It was part of her culture, and she was proud of it. Principal Carter told Sophia that if she didn't fix her hair by the next day, she would be suspended. This made her really sad. She cried for the rest of the day because she felt embarrassed and like something was wrong with her. Sophia went home and told her parents what happened. They didn't understand why her hair was a problem either. They were upset but didn't want Sophia to get in more trouble, so they told her to take out her braids. Sophia didn't wear braids again for the rest of high school. She felt like she had to hide who she was just to stay out of trouble. Even years later, she still remembered how terrible it felt to be told that her hair wasn't okay. Another student named Caleb shared his story too. He was in his late 20s now, but he hadn't forgotten how Principal Carter treated him in high school. Caleb was a quiet kid who focused on his schoolwork. He didn't cause any problems, but Principal Carter always seemed to have an issue with his hair. Caleb had an afro, and he loved it. His dad wore his hair in an afro too, and it made Caleb feel close to his family and his culture. But Principal Carter didn't like it. He would call Caleb into his office and tell him that his hair made him look aggressive and that the school didn't want that kind of image. Caleb couldn't understand it. How could his hair make him look scary? He was just a kid. Things got worse over time. Principal Carter started punishing Caleb for things he didn't even do. If something went wrong in class, Caleb was always the first person Principal Carter would blame, even if it wasn't his fault. Caleb started getting in trouble for the smallest things. He was even suspended once for being disruptive during a class discussion, even though the teacher said he didn't do anything wrong. Caleb's grades started to drop because he was getting pulled out of class so much. He started to hate school and even hate himself. He didn't understand why Principal Carter was treating him this way, but it was clear that his hair was part of the reason. It made Caleb feel sad and confused for a long time. Another student named Darius had a story that was a little different. He wasn't just treated unfairly because of his hair. His whole future was affected by Principal Carter's actions. Darius was an athlete and one of the best runners on the school's track team. He had dreams of going to college on a sports scholarship. Darius had locks, a hairstyle he had been growing since middle school. His coaches didn't care about his hair. They only cared about how well he performed. But Principal Carter thought Darius should cut his hair. He would pull Darius aside during school events and tell him that college scouts would take him more seriously if he didn't have locks. Darius didn't listen because he knew his talent was enough to get him noticed. But Principal Carter didn't stop there. He started making it harder for Darius to stay on the track team. He would say that Darius wasn't doing well in his classes or that he was missing too many school days, even though none of that was true. It seemed like Principal Carter was trying to punish Darius for not cutting his hair. The worst part came when college scouts, who had been very interested in Darius, suddenly stopped calling. Darius found out later that Principal Carter had been telling them that Darius had an attitude problem and that he wasn't coachable. None of it was true, but because of what Principal Carter said, Darius lost his chance at a sports scholarship. Darius ended up going to college based on his grades, but he was heartbroken that he missed out on his dream of running track. He had worked so hard only for one man's prejudice to ruin it all. As more and more students like Sophia, Caleb, and Darius came forward with their stories, people started to realize just how bad things were. Principal Carter had hurt so many students for so many years, and now everyone was hearing about it. People were angry and wanted something to be done. There was an emergency meeting at the school, and many parents, teachers, and students showed up. They wanted answers. They wanted to know how Principal Carter had been able to get away with treating students this way for so long. The school promised to investigate and take action, but for many of the students who had been hurt, it felt like too little, too late. In the end, the stories of these brave students helped bring attention to the way Principal Carter treated them unfairly. They showed that it's important to speak up when something is wrong, even if it's scary. And they taught others that everyone should be treated with respect, no matter how they look or where they come from. One day, Zara and her family went to a big meeting at her school. The room was packed with parents, teachers, and students, all feeling upset and worried. The school was in trouble because something unfair had happened to Zara and other students like her. The school's spokesperson, a man who talks for the school, stood on the stage looking very nervous. He had a paper in his hands that he tried to read, but the people in the room wouldn't stay quiet. Parents were shouting questions, demanding answers. Everyone wanted to know what the school was going to do about Principal Carter, the principal. Finally, the spokesperson said what everyone was waiting to hear. Principal Carter has been placed on administrative leave, which means he won't be working at the school while we investigate what happened. Some people cheered, happy that the school was doing something. Others were still angry and yelled more. Zara and her family left the meeting feeling a bit better. It wasn't the end of the fight, but it was a good start. Zara knew there was still more work to do, but now she felt hopeful that things could change. The next day was very important. Zara and her parents went to court where the big decision would be made about what was fair. They sat with their lawyer, Miss Jackson, who was ready to fight for Zara. She had lots of papers and was fully prepared. There were many people in the room, and even reporters with cameras were there to capture the moment. Across the room, Principal Carter sat with his own lawyers. He looked serious, but Zara noticed that he seemed nervous too. He didn't even look at her. The case had become very big. It wasn't just about Zara anymore. It was about how Black students like her had been treated unfairly for a long time. When the judge came in, everyone got quiet. The trial began, and Miss Jackson stood up to speak. She told the judge that Zara had been suspended from school unfairly because of her hair. The school's rules, or dress code, said Zara couldn't wear her hair the way she wanted, but those rules seemed to be unfairly aimed at Black students. Miss Jackson also showed that Principal Carter had a history of doing this kind of thing. She called up witnesses to tell their stories. One by one, they explained how they too had been treated unfairly by Principal Carter, just like Zara. One of the witnesses was a woman named Kira, who had been a student at a different school where Principal Carter worked before. She told a story about how one day she had worn her hair in braids, and Principal Carter told her it wasn't professional. He made her feel bad about herself and sent her home from school. Kira's voice shook a little as she spoke, but she was brave. She said, "I never thought I'd have to deal with that again, but then I heard about Zara, and it was the same thing all over again." The room was very quiet as everyone listened to Kira's story. It was clear that this wasn't just a one-time problem. After many days of listening to stories, it was finally Principal Carter's turn to speak. He got up to tell his side, but he didn't seem as confident as before. His lawyer tried to explain that Principal Carter was just following school rules and didn't mean to hurt anyone. But Miss Jackson wasn't going to let that be the final word. She asked him tough questions, forcing him to admit that he didn't think about how his rules affected Black students. Finally, Principal Carter said, "I thought I was doing what was best for the school, but maybe I didn't understand how much harm it caused." Everyone in the room gasped. Zara couldn't believe it. Principal Carter, the person who had suspended her, was finally admitting that what he did was wrong. Soon after, the judge made the final decision. The judge said that Principal Carter had been unfair to Zara because of her race and ruled in favor of Zara and her family. The school was told to pay Zara's family money for the trouble they caused, and even more importantly, they had to change their dress code rules. The new rules would make sure no student could be punished for wearing their natural hair. As the judge read the decision out loud, Zara felt a huge wave of relief. She had won, not just for herself, but for every Black student who had ever been told their hair was wrong. The news spread quickly. Everyone heard about the trial, and soon the school board asked Principal Carter to resign. His reputation was ruined. More and more people came forward to tell their stories about how Principal Carter had treated them badly too. His career was over. Zara felt proud of what she had done, but she also knew that this wasn't just about one principal. It was about changing a whole system that had been unfair to Black students for a long time. And even though Principal Carter was gone, the system was still there, and more work needed to be done. A week after the trial, Zara went back to school. She walked through the hallways where people used to whisper about her, but now things were different. Other students smiled at her, some even nodded to show respect. She noticed that more Black students were wearing their natural hair, feeling free to be themselves without worrying about getting in trouble. As she walked to her locker, she saw a younger girl with big, beautiful curls. The girl gave Zara a small smile and mouthed the words, "Thank you." Zara smiled back, feeling proud. This was why she had fought so hard, for students like that girl who could now be proud of who they were. Later that day, the school held a special assembly. The new temporary principal spoke to all the students. She talked about the changes happening at the school. The dress code rules were being fixed. Teachers and staff were going to have training to learn how to be more fair and respectful, and the school was promising to be more inclusive, which meant everyone would be treated fairly, no matter what they looked like. When Zara was called up to the stage, the whole room clapped and cheered. It was so loud that Zara's heart raced with excitement. She didn't want to be famous or anything, but she knew that her fight had made a big difference. She stood in front of her classmates, her voice strong and calm, and said, "This victory isn't just mine. It belongs to all of us." And that's how Zara helped change things for the better, not just for herself, but for everyone at her school and for all the kids who would come after her. The fight had been hard, but it was worth it. Now students could feel proud of who they were, and no one would ever tell them that their natural hair wasn't good enough again. Everyone who has ever felt like they didn't fit in, like they had to hide a part of who they are, well, we don't have to hide anymore. Our hair, our culture, our identity, they aren't things to be ashamed of. They are our strength. The crowd cheered loudly, and Zara felt stronger than ever before. That it had been months since her school fight, but Zara's bravery didn't stop there. Her story was spreading far beyond her school. What started as a small fight became something bigger. News channels from all over the country shared her story about how students were being treated unfairly because of their natural hair. Zara's face became known everywhere as someone standing up for people to be proud of who they are. It wasn't just about her anymore. It was about everyone who looked different, everyone who had been told they weren't good enough. School rules about hair started changing across the country, and people began talking about how unfair it was to tell kids how to wear their hair. This wasn't just about hair. It was about standing up to old rules that hurt people of color. Zara got invited to speak at many places. She spoke on stages about fairness, about being proud of your culture, and natural hair. She was even asked to talk at a big national meeting with important people like lawmakers and activists. Zara, who used to doubt herself, now spoke with confidence at every event. One morning, as Zara got ready for another speech, her mom came into her room with a letter. "This came in the mail for you," her mom said with a smile. Zara opened the envelope slowly. Inside was a letter from a group of young girls at another school. They had seen Zara's story on the news, and it gave them the courage to protest when their school tried to make them change their natural hair. "Dear Zara," the letter began, "because of you, we didn't give up. We stood strong and they changed the rule. You helped us believe that we matter. Thank you." Tears filled Zara's eyes. She had hoped her fight would make a difference, but seeing this letter from younger girls made her feel deeply proud. These girls didn't have to go through the pain she had, and that was all she ever wanted. Her mom placed a hand on her shoulder and said, "You've made a big difference, Zara, and this is just the beginning." At Zara's own school, things were already changing. The new rules meant students could wear their hair however they wanted, without fear of being punished. Posters celebrating all kinds of hair and cultures hung in the hallways. The school even hired someone to make sure every student felt seen, heard, and respected. Teachers went through special training to better understand racism and unfairness. They wanted to make sure the school was a welcoming place for everyone. More than anything, Zara noticed that the students felt prouder and walked with their heads held high. They knew their school was now a place where their identities were celebrated, not punished. One morning, as Zara walked through the halls, students she didn't even know smiled at her, and some gave her nods of appreciation. Younger kids wore their natural hair proudly, no longer scared of being sent home or getting into trouble. Zara realized her journey had come full circle. What started as her standing up for herself had grown into a big movement. She had inspired others to do the same. A few months later, Zara stood on the steps of her high school on graduation day. The air was full of excitement, and her classmates were buzzing with energy. She wore her cap with the words, "My hair, my crown" on it. Her hair, now in a beautiful afro, framed her face like a glowing halo. As the valedictorian, Zara was asked to give the graduation speech. She had spent weeks writing the perfect words, wanting to make sure they reflected everything she had learned in high school, not just from books, but about herself, her identity, and the power of standing up for what's right. When she stepped up to the microphone, the crowd became quiet. Zara's heart raced as she looked out at her classmates, her teachers, her family, and even the community members who had come to support her. "Good morning, class of 2024, she started, her voice strong and clear. "Today we stand on the edge of something new. We've spent years preparing for this moment, and now we're ready to step into the world and make a difference." Zara paused, letting her words sink in. There will be times when people try to tell you who you should be, how you should look, and how you should act to fit in. But you must remember that your identity, your culture, and your voice are powerful. You have the right to take up space. You have the right to be yourself, no matter what anyone says. She saw heads nodding in the crowd, and her chest swelled with emotion. When I was suspended for wearing my natural hair, I felt like they were saying who I wasn't good enough. But what I learned is that it's not about being good enough for others. It's about knowing you are enough, just as you are. And if you stand up for what's right, you can change the world. The crowd erupted into cheers, and Zara smiled, feeling the love and pride around her. She had come so far, and this moment was the reward for all her struggles and victories. As the ceremony ended, Zara looked out over her classmates one last time. The future was bright, not just for her, but for every student who had watched her fight for what was right. They learned that they, too, could make a difference. In the months and years that followed, the natural hair movement continued to grow. Zara became one of its most important voices. She went to college to study law so she could fight for fairness and justice. But she never stopped being an activist. She was invited to speak at even bigger events, pushing for more changes in schools and workplaces across the country. Laws began to change, too. The Crown Act, which stood for creating a respectful and open world for natural hair, gained support across the nation. States started passing laws that made it illegal to treat people unfairly because of their hair in schools, workplaces, and public places. Zara's fight had helped bring this issue into the spotlight, and her victory helped make long-lasting change. But Zara knew there was still more work to be done. Even though progress had been made, there were still unfair systems that needed to be fixed. But she also knew she wasn't alone in this fight. She had inspired a generation of young Black girls and boys to embrace their natural selves, no matter what anyone said. As Zara moved forward in her life, she carried with her the belief that change was possible. She had seen it with her own eyes, and as long as she kept fighting, she knew the world could become a place where everyone, no matter their background, could stand tall and proud, just as they were. Share your thoughts about this story in the comments below. I would love to hear your perspective. And if you enjoyed the story, please subscribe to my channel. I am spending hours upon hours writing these heartwarming and inspiring stories for you, and your support is what keeps me going.